Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, MemSQL Helios Technical Overview. My name is Alicia, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to review. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you are currently in a listen-only mode. You may submit any questions you have throughout the webinar via the Q&A or chat function in the lower right corner of your console. You can also follow us on Twitter at MemSQL or live tweet us during the webinar using hashtag MemSQLWebinar. We will address everyone's questions towards the end of today's presentation. After today's webinar, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording and slides. If you wish to contact us, please send us an email to team@memsql.com. In today's webinar, we will dive deep into real-life use cases of MemSQL Helios, go under the hood to see how MemSQL works, and we will close the session with a live Q&A. With that said, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Sarang Tripathi. Sarang brings several years of experience working with customers to build cloud-native data platforms. He is currently a solutions consultant with MemSQL, focusing on building streaming applications for analytics and machine learning. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome, Sarang. You now have the floor.
Hey everyone, thank you, Alicia. I'm just going to get started today with a brief introduction. Like Alicia said, my name is Sarang Tripathi. I'm a solutions consultant here at MemSQL. Today we'll be going through Helios, our database as a service offering. Before getting into Helios, I want to tell you a little bit about MemSQL and its differentiators. So what makes MemSQL unique? Starts with, what is MemSQL? So MemSQL is a cloud-native operational database. What that requires is the ability to ingest streaming data in real time with great performance, as well as be able to access that data with pure SQL. What's great about MemSQL is that anybody knows how to access MemSQL before they even get to it, whether you're a data analyst, data engineer, data scientist, you already know how to access MemSQL if you know SQL. What really sets MemSQL apart as well is our data flexibility. MemSQL can ingest geospatial data, time series data, key value, and the unstructured data. With a pure relational database, it still gives you that ANSI SQL compatibility, such that you don't need to know any other language to access MemSQL. You can access any type of data. So what is MemSQL Helios? Helios is, like I mentioned earlier, a database as a service offering, fully managed, on-demand, and elastic. So what MemSQL offers with the Helios product is cluster provisioning, your deployments, upgrades, alerting, troubleshooting, etc. And all the user has to do is do the logical management of the data itself. MemSQL Helios delivers effortless deployment, fully elastic, a superior TCO to legacy databases like Oracle Exadata, the ability to deploy in many different clouds, including AWS and GCP, and Azure is coming this year, and giving you that increased agility in your cloud native operations. So how does Helios work? Helios is built on Kubernetes, so any of those features and functions that you're familiar with from a Kubernetes perspective are baked into how we deploy MemSQL Helios, such as auto-heal node failure, auto-scaling, rolling upgrades, etc. So we use containers for compute and block storage for data like AWS EBS. High availability is transparently built into MemSQL Helios, so you have to do nothing extra for high availability. And MemSQL Helios has TLS security enabled by default within the platform. I'm going to start with a quick polling question so I can get a better idea of the audience, and you can also get a better idea of your peers that are on the webinar as well. So the question that we have today is, what cloud provider are you currently using? AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, or other? Other could be Alibaba Cloud or something else. Feel free to answer. Awesome, very cool. So it looks like we are spread across many different clouds here, which is great, and that's something that we're seeing a lot in our customer bases today. Most of our customers are not just using one cloud. We do have a strong AWS presence, but Google Cloud, Azure, and other clouds, like I mentioned, Alibaba and others, are very popular within our customer base. But the good news here is that it seems like a good bit of our audience are using the three major clouds out there right now, which is excellent because Helios is available and will be available on all three of these in 2020. All right, so the moment you've all been waiting for, we're now going to get into our Helios demo, so you can see Helios in action. What you'll see today is digital advertising data coming into MemSQL Helios in real time. This will enable analysts to drill down and get into the metrics of a traditional digital advertising funnel. So impressions, click-through, conversions that an advertiser would be curious in seeing. So what you'll see from a technical perspective is how to create a Helios cluster, create your schemas, create your real-time data pipelines, and then access Helios from a BI dashboard. Let's jump right in. So whether you'd like to use MemSQL Helios or self-manage your MemSQL cluster, you will need to create a MemSQL portal account. So you can do that by going to portal.memsql.com, creating an account, and no matter what offering you're using, you'll always land on this page. This is your customer portal. What you'll get here is the ability to access all of our free training, which is hands-on, forums to answer your questions about MemSQL, and any documentation that we have put together around how to do things in MemSQL. Like I mentioned earlier, you can self-manage clusters on your own VMs using MemSQL, but today we're going to be discussing Helios, so I'll click here on our managed service clusters. As you'll see here, I already have a cluster running. This is what we're going to work on today to build out a cluster and access it via a BI dashboard. But I'm going to show you also how to create a cluster. So I'll go to the top right and say create cluster. I can name my cluster here. So I'll say Helios Webinar 2, since I already have a 1. I can tag it with a cluster type. I can put it in one of a few different AWS or GCP regions, Azure again coming this year. And then I get my cost associated with it and my cluster size. Every unit of MemSQL comes with 1 terabyte of storage, so should have plenty based on the cluster size that we're putting together. So I select my password here, and I can configure my cluster access restrictions here, whether I want to only allow access from specified IPs or from anywhere. Right now, I'll just click anywhere for the purpose of the demo because I'll probably shut this cluster down shortly. My billing information is then provided to me, and I can say create cluster, and this process takes about 5 minutes. So this will give me all the details that I just put in, my username, my password, and then all the connection details here will become available within 5 minutes. But instead of waiting on that, let's go back to the original cluster that I had, which is identical to the one I just created, but it was created a bit earlier today. So here you'll see all the same details as the cluster that we just created, but also we'll see connection details. So I'll direct your attention here to the administrative endpoint as well as the client endpoint. The admin endpoint is for your alter, create, drop, etc. types of commands that you do in a database, and the client endpoint is for your inserts, selects, updates, deletes, etc. So this is the client endpoint that we would use for things like BI tools, for your and for your end clients for MemSQL. So I'm going to go ahead and open MemSQL Studio. And here you'll see also that I have my cluster. I have 1 database in my cluster, 7 nodes, my memory usage, disk usage, etc. No data yet, and no pipelines. So go to my SQL editor. And what I can do now is start to write some queries. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to use some advertising data, and this is something that's available in our doc. So this is an example that you could use as well. We have a Kafka topic here that we use for examples inside of MemSQL, and this is publicly available that you could use for those digital advertising events. Let's just start by putting some SQL commands into the studio. So I'm going to copy that, paste it, and then we'll walk through what these means. So we can go ahead and drop the database if it exists. It exists already. We can go through that process. Then we can recreate the database. And then the next step after that will be to actually use that ad tech database. Now what I'm going to do is create my table called events. And this is a table that all of my live events are going to land into. Right? This table has a user ID, an event name, what type of marketing event that it was that came through in real time, who the advertiser was, what the campaign was, etc. Let's go ahead and click this and we can run. I'm also going to create a reference table here. This reference table is going to contain some campaign information for that live data to reference. What's interesting to note about reference tables in MemSQL is that reference tables are stored on every leaf node within MemSQL. What that gives you the ability to do is to do your joins and do your reference lookups very quickly, because the reference table essentially lives everywhere that data lives within MemSQL. So now I'm going to put some static values into that campaigns table. I'm just going to say demand great, blackout, flame broiled, a few different types of advertising campaigns that we're running here. I can insert those values. And now I have a number of different tables in MemSQL, one that's going to contain data that's coming in live, and one that's going to be used as more of a reference table. Let's go back and see what our next step in the tutorial is. Create pipeline. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to create a pipeline of data into MemSQL using Kafka. I'm going to drop that data into my table that's called events that we just created. And here's the schema for that Kafka topic. If I go ahead and just click run here, you can see I've quickly, with 7 lines of SQL, just created a pipeline into live Kafka data. Now what I'll need to do is start that pipeline. So I want the latest events off of that pipeline, and I'm going to start it. So I hit run. And now we can run some sample queries. So I'm going to copy those sample queries. And again, this is something that you could do too. That's a publicly facing link. Let's just start by looking at the number of events that we're processing within our table. So it looks like we have a number of events, and that number is increasing over time. So we have, I believe that's about 10 million records. And every time we update this query, the number is going up because, as I mentioned, this data is coming in live from Kafka. Now, a little bit differently here, we have our reference table, which is static, and that's staying the same. We can also look at a traditional, our traditional funnel of campaigns and impressions, click counts, etc. If I click that, I see my data, and that data is also updating in real time. Which campaigns have what number of impressions, number of clicks, etc. So as you can see here, if we pause for a second, is we've created a real-time feed into Kafka in a cloud native database that is updating in real time as every data point comes in. So now let's look at some real life applications of that. I've now opened up a Looker dashboard that has real-time data coming in from my Kafka topic into that same events table in MemSQL Helios. So I have the number of ad events by top 5 advertisers. I have all of my ad events coming in real time. As you'll see, they're updating real time here. And that number of add events reflects pretty similarly to what we were seeing the count in the table query that we were running earlier. It's just about 10 million, and it's updating every second and rising. So between MemSQL and Looker, you're able to consume real-time data and then also display that data on a once per second basis within a dashboard. I'm also able to see which regions have the most number of ad events based on the vendors. I'm also able to see the ad event counts by income levels here as well. So we can go back into MemSQL Studio, run some more queries, and that concludes what we're going to show in the demo portion of today. So what you've just seen is how using MemSQL Helios, we get the power of speed, scale, and SQL all in one platform. So what you'll hear from a lot of databases is speed of getting data out. But what MemSQL also offers is the speed of getting data out, like you saw in Looker, but also getting data in through pipelines like Kafka. That scale that you saw, the ability to create very large clusters, very small clusters, scale up and down elastically using Helios. And then all we used was a traditional SQL language to access that complex data. So it's very easy to get speed, scale, and SQL out of MemSQL Helios. Let's talk through a quick case study on a customer of ours that's using Helios. So Medaxian is a technology provider in the medical space specific to anesthesiologist practices. So they consume data, medical data from everywhere, and provide these in dashboards or in mobile applications to doctors to use to help patients. So as you can imagine, that medical data is coming in very quickly, and the doctors have to act on that data also very quickly. So Medaxian came to us and said, hey, we have 30 seconds between when we get the data and when we actually have to act on it. Unfortunately for Medaxian, they were not able to achieve this with MySQL because they simply could not scale to meet the user growth and demand that they were getting from their anesthesiologists. So that their customer experience is quite poor. And so they turned to MemSQL and said, hey, we need something that allows us to use SQL because we have Looker, we have mobile apps, we have various different platforms that we need to present this data to. We need it to be a managed service so we can offload this burden of managing the database to someone else. And it needs to be reliable because doctors are always working. So MemSQL Helios was able to offer them that fast, scalable SQL across all the different applications that were using the database, compatibility with the MySQL wire protocol, so they're able to take all of the queries, all the table structures, etc., and move it from MySQL to MemSQL. They're able to be elastic for when their doctors saw very high demand, and they're able to get those near real-time results that their business required of them. So with that, I'll conclude and say, like you saw today in the MemSQL portal, you can try MemSQL for free today. You can try Helios. We have 8-hour trials that you can go ahead and get started at memsql.com/Helios. You could also contact us at helios@memsql.com. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Durang. Thanks for your presentation. We'll now begin the Q&A portion of today's webinar. So as a reminder, you may submit your questions through the Q&A function located in the lower right side of your console. It looks like we have some questions already in, so we can start with this one. How does backup restore work on Helios?
Sure, that's a great question. So Helios, MemSQL takes daily backups of Helios, your Helios cluster, and you can also do backups to S3, Azure Blob Storage, Google, whatever it may be. And what we've offered now in our MemSQL 7.1 release is also incremental backup to S3. So instead of having to take full backups periodically, whether it's every day, every week, every month, MemSQL will also start taking incremental backups. So what's changed since the last backup, which makes backups a lot more efficient in our platform.
Thanks, Durang. Is the disk storage adjustable for the cluster size?
So disk storage in Helios is currently 1 terabyte per node, and that's not adjustable. That's something that we're looking at for the future.
Okay, thanks. We have another question. Is MemSQL ACID compliant?
Yes, MemSQL is HACCP compliant.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for all of the questions. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email us at helios@memsql.com. We also have a short survey followed by the close of the webinar. We appreciate your participation if you can stick around an extra minute or two. I want to thank Sarang and each of you for attending today. Just a reminder, we'll be sending you a follow-up email with a link to today's recording and slides. If you have any questions in the future, you can send us an email to team@memsql.com. We invite you to learn more about MemSQL at memsql.com or get started with your free trial of MemSQL Helios at memsql.com/Helios. Again, thank you for participating and have a great remainder of the day.